Listen up, chosen one. Before anything else, hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and turn on those notifications, because what's coming next ain't just a message, it's a wake-up call straight for your spirit. The kind that grabs you by the heart and shakes you awake in the best way possible. The kind that whispers, yo, don't you even think about skipping this, because deep down you can feel it. Something in your chest tightening, something pulling you in. And it's not random, it's not coincidence, it's purpose tapping on the door of your soul saying, open up, I've got something for you. And right now, in this very moment, God is setting the stage for your next 24 hours, aligning things in ways you can't even see yet, shifting the atmosphere around you like a quiet storm, preparing to break open with blessing. And I know life hasn't been easy lately. I know you've had some nights where you stared at the ceiling wondering if you're strong enough, wondering if God still hears you, wondering why things felt stuck or slow or heavy. But hold up. Because that heaviness you've been feeling isn't a sign of defeat, it's a sign of transition. It's the pressure right before breakthrough. It's the spiritual version of a slingshot being pulled back so far that the launch is going to be wild, unstoppable, and crazy powerful. And if you're hearing this, it's because you were meant to. It's because the next 24 hours aren't just another day on the calendar. They're a divine appointment, a crucial moment where God says, I'm about to reveal something. And maybe you've been praying for clarity. Maybe you've been asking for direction. Maybe you've been begging for some kind of sign that you're not alone. Well, guess what? This is it. This is your confirmation. This is God stepping into your timeline saying, I'm right here. I never left. And the truth is, He's been working behind the scenes, rearranging things, protecting you from battles you didn't even know were coming, pulling you out of situations that looked good but weren't good. And now He's preparing to open something that's been waiting for you, something with your name on it, something that can't be blocked, can't be stolen, can't be delayed, something that has been building since the moment you decided not to give up, since the moment you kept going even when your heart felt tired, even when the world felt loud, even when the people around you didn't understand the fire inside you. And I need you to hear this in your chest, not just your ears. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be for God to move, because the story He's writing for you is not ordinary. And ordinary timing doesn't apply to extraordinary purpose. And right now, God is saying, stay close. I'm revealing something. And if you're thinking, why me? Why does this message feel like it's talking directly to me? It's because God knows how to reach you in a way that cuts through the noise, in a way that feels personal, in a way that He feels like He's sitting right next to you, reminding you that your calling is bigger than the confusion, bigger than the fear, bigger than the delay, and bigger than every single storm you've survived. Which brings me to this moment right here, this divine nudge in your spirit as I speak these words, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And hold up, I know you've heard that before, but this time let it sink deep, because the weapon forming isn't the problem. It's the prospering that God blocks. And the reason you're still standing today is because the stuff that tried to break you didn't succeed, didn't win, didn't take you out. And the reason is simple. God still has work to do through you. And the next 24 hours are going to be part of that shift, part of that unlocking, part of that divine setup. And if you think I'm speaking hype, if you think this is just motivation, nah, this is revelation. This is spiritual alignment. This is heaven brushing up against your reality, and this is God preparing your heart for what He's about to do. And right now, I want to bring you into a moment, a story, something real, something that hits the soul. Imagine a young man who felt like life was slipping out of his hands, bills piling up, dreams fading out, people turning cold. And he would wake up every morning feeling like he was walking underwater, slow, heavy, breathless. And yet for some reason, he didn't quit, and he didn't know why. He just kept going. And one night he prayed, not fancy, not poetic, just raw, real, desperate. God, if you're real, show me something. And the next morning he woke up and nothing looked different, but something felt different. Something felt like stillness in his chest, like peace trying to break through the cracks. And that same day he got a call. An opportunity he thought he lost was suddenly open again. A door he thought was closed swung back wide. And when he got off the phone, he didn't cry because of the opportunity. He cried because he realized God didn't forget him. God didn't abandon him. God didn't ignore him. And that young man learned something that changed everything. Sometimes God answers not with fireworks, but with timing, not with noise, but with alignment. And the same God who stepped into his situation is stepping into yours right now. And He's saying, chosen one, don't panic, don't doubt, don't quit. I'm revealing your next 24 hours. And speaking of revelation, here comes the verse that cuts deep, the one that hits your spirit like thunder. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Read that again in your heart. Feel the weight of it. Feel the hope in it. Feel the promise in it. Because that's not a verse for everybody else. That's a verse for you right here, Right now, in this moment where things are shifting, timelines are aligning, and God is saying, I'm not done with you yet. And as this message keeps flowing, as your heart keeps opening, as your spirit keeps awakening, you're about to realize something powerful. You're about to realize that everything you went through, every delay, every disappointment, every lonely night, every moment where you felt forgotten, every time you carried more than you could handle, wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And I know that sounds wild when you think about the stuff that broke your heart, the people who walked away, the situations that didn't make sense, but let me tell you something real. God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't waste struggle. He doesn't waste tears. He doesn't waste seasons. And the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still fighting, still searching for purpose, still hungry for more, is the biggest proof that your story isn't over. And the next 24 hours aren't random, they're strategic, they're intentional. They're woven into your destiny like threads of gold in a tapestry you couldn't see at first because you were too close to the mess. But now God is pulling you back to show you the masterpiece. And as He does that, you're going to start noticing small things shift. The way certain thoughts hit different, the way peace sneaks in where anxiety used to live, the way certain people suddenly appear or disappear, the way opportunities start aligning like puzzle pieces falling into place. And you're going to think, wait, is this really happening? And God is going to whisper, yes, I told you I was revealing your next 24 hours. Because when God moves, He moves with precision, He moves with purpose, He moves with divine detail that makes you realize just how deeply He sees you, how deeply He knows you, and how deeply He cares for you, even in the moments when you felt unworthy or unseen. And speaking of unseen, let me take you into another moment, another story, one that echoes through your own life more than you might realize. There was a woman who felt like everything around her was collapsing, family issues draining her energy, finances tight, her mind running in circles, her faith hanging by a thread. And every night she would sit in her car after work because it was the only quiet place she had, and she'd rest her forehead on the steering wheel and just breathe. Just try to hold herself together long enough to make it inside without breaking down. And one night, in that car, she whispered, God, I can't do this anymore. But instead of giving up, she played a message kind of like this one, something that told her not to quit, something that told her God was still working. And she didn't feel fireworks or goosebumps, but she felt something shift, something tiny, something soft. And the next day, a friend she hadn't spoken to in months reached out, offered help, offered support, offered love. And she realized something. The miracle wasn't the help. The miracle was that she wasn't alone, that God heard her whisper in that dark car, that God moved someone's heart on her behalf. And that moment changed her. It gave her strength. It gave her hope. And that same God who saw her in the car is seeing you right now in the exact place you are, hearing the exact thoughts you're thinking, understanding the weight you're carrying, and He's standing in front of you spiritually saying, I'm not asking you to be perfect, I'm asking you to trust me. Because trust is the bridge between where you are and where He's taking you. Trust is the key to unlock the next 24 hours. Trust is the reason doors are about to open and chains are about to break, and peace is about to flow where chaos used to live. And listen, I'm not saying everything is going to magically get easy. I'm saying God is about to move in a way that makes you stronger than what you're facing, wiser than what tried to confuse you, braver than the fear that tried to control you, and more aligned with His plan than ever before. And if your heart is beating a little faster right now, if something inside you feels like it's waking up, that's because this message is touching the part of your spirit that's been waiting for confirmation, waiting for guidance, waiting for God to say, this is your moment. And let me remind you, faith doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like a quiet nudge, a soft push, a whisper that says, keep going, because God speaks loudest in the stillness, in the moments without noise, without crowds, without distractions. And in the next 24 hours, you're going to experience a moment like that, a moment where clarity hits you like a wave, where something finally makes sense, where confusion breaks, where your spirit lifts, and you're going to say, that was God. And you won't even question it because it'll feel too intentional, too aligned, too perfectly timed to be anything else. And the wildest part, He's been preparing this exact moment for you longer than you realize. Way before this video, way before this day, way before the challenges you've been fighting through. Because God sees the end from the beginning. He sees who you're becoming. He sees the strength inside you that you sometimes overlook. He sees the resilience you built from surviving storms. He sees the light in you that darkness couldn't put out. And He's saying, chosen one, this next chapter is different. And as this paragraph flows, as your heart stays open, as your spirit stays alert,
The story is only getting stronger.
Because God is bringing you into a season where the things that didn't make sense before are about to connect. The prayers you thought went unanswered are about to show up as blessings in disguise. The delays you hated are about to reveal why they protected you. And the moments where you felt like giving up are about to become the exact proof that you were built for this, chosen for this, strengthened for this. And if you could only see what God is setting up behind the curtain of your life right now, you wouldn't doubt for a single second. You wouldn't question if you're worthy. You wouldn't wonder if you're capable. You wouldn't stress about what you can't control. You would walk with your head held high because God is whispering over you, you're stepping into a divine moment. And that moment isn't somewhere far away. It's right in front of you, breathing on your timeline, shaping your next 24 hours with purpose and clarity and favor. And I know the world tries to distract you, tries to convince you that nothing is changing, tries to drown you with thoughts that aren't from God, but that's only because something is changing, something is shifting, something is breaking in the spirit, and the enemy always fights hardest when breakthrough is closest. So if you've been feeling tired, overwhelmed, or mentally drained lately, that's not a sign that everything is falling apart. That's a sign that everything is coming together. That's a sign that God is pulling you out of what was and guiding you into what will be. And sometimes that transition feels uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like stretching. Sometimes it feels like pressure. But remember this, diamonds don't form without pressure. Warriors don't rise without battles. And chosen ones don't step into their calling without a season that tests their strength. And right now, God is saying, I saw every tear, every silent battle, every moment you kept going when nobody knew what it cost you. And the beautiful thing is, God counts that. He counts the nights you didn't quit, the days you showed up even with a heavy heart, the moments you helped others while you were hurting, the times you prayed even when your faith felt thin. And because of that, He's about to reward you in ways that go beyond your imagination, ways that make you stop and say, wow, only God could have done that. And let me paint you a scene, a moment that mirrors your heart more than you might realize. Imagine a guy who felt like life hit him from every angle. Job stress, relationships falling apart, his confidence slipping, his sense of purpose fading. And one night, he sat on the edge of his bed feeling completely done, like he had nothing left in the tank. And he whispered, God, if you still have a plan for me, I need you to show me because I can't see it anymore. And he fell asleep with that prayer sitting heavy on his chest. And when he woke up the next morning, he didn't wake up to a miracle. He woke up to a thought, a small, subtle thought that said, try again. And for some reason, that was enough to get him moving, enough to get him to take one small step he'd been avoiding. And that one step led to another, and then another. And a few weeks later, he found himself in a situation he didn't expect, an opportunity opening up, a connection forming, something shifting that made him realize God answered his prayer not with lightning, but with direction, not with fireworks, but with alignment. And that alignment changed everything because God doesn't need a big moment to shift your life. He just needs the right moment. And that's exactly what's coming in your next 24 hours. A moment of divine alignment, a moment that snaps things into place, a moment that makes you realize God has been orchestrating every detail, every encounter, every opportunity, every shift. And maybe you haven't seen the results yet, but trust me, God is working in the unseen, working in silence, working in the places that your eyes can't reach, but your spirit can feel. And the reason you've been feeling restless, the reason you've been sensing something coming, the reason you've been spiritually alert, because your soul knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Your soul recognizes a shift before your life reflects it. And right now, your spirit is picking up on what God is doing, the way He's turning the page, the way He's opening new doors, the way He's clearing out the old to make room for the new. And when God clears something out, He's not taking something from you. He's making space for something better, something that fits your future, something that matches your calling, something that aligns with who you're becoming. And maybe that's been the hardest part, watching people fall away, watching doors close, watching situations fade. But listen carefully. Not everyone is meant to stand in your next chapter. Not every relationship is meant to carry into your destiny. Not every opportunity has the capacity to hold your purpose. And the moment God separates you from what's not for you, it hurts, but it protects you, and it positions you,
and it purifies the path ahead. And in the next 24 hours, you're going to start seeing why certain things didn't work out, why certain people walked away, why certain plans fell apart. And it's not because you weren't enough, it's because God was redirecting you towards something greater. And as this truth settles in your chest, as your spirit absorbs this message, the energy around you is shifting, the atmosphere is changing, the story is unfolding, and God is saying, "Get ready, chosen one. I'm not done speaking to you through this message. There's more coming. More revelation, more clarity, more power."
Because what's rising inside you right now is not emotion, it's activation. It's a spiritual ignition, a spark that God Himself is breathing on. And that spark is about to turn into a flame that lights your path, a flame that burns off doubt, a flame that reveals who you really are beneath the fear, beneath the overthinking, beneath the pressure you've been carrying for way too long. And you might not even realize it yet, but God has been reshaping your identity, strengthening your spirit, sharpening your discernment, and preparing your mind so that when the blessings arrive, you won't sabotage them. When the opportunities open, you won't second-guess them. When the new season begins, you'll be ready to walk in it with boldness, confidence, and an authority you didn't have before. And this internal work God is doing is just as important as what's about to manifest externally in your life. And speaking of manifestation, get this deep in your chest. The next 24 hours aren't just about what you'll see. They're about what you'll feel, what you'll realize, what you'll release, and what you'll finally accept. Because there's been something tugging at your spirit, something you've been wrestling with silently, something that keeps coming back into your thoughts. And God is saying, it's time to let that go. Because the weight you've been carrying from that old hurt, that old disappointment, that old memory has held onto your spirit long enough. And God is stepping into that space saying, I'm lifting this off you. And that release is going to feel like a breath you didn't know you were holding finally escaping, like pressure melting, like chains falling, like clarity hitting you all at once. And when that release happens, everything else begins to shift. Your energy, your focus, your confidence, your ability to dream again. And God wants you to dream again, not because dreaming fixes everything, but because dreaming awakens what the world tried to bury in you. And that's why He's been protecting your spirit, even in seasons where you felt vulnerable, even when you didn't understand what He was doing, even when you questioned if He was listening, because God knew the calling on your life was bigger than the pain you endured. And I know this might sound deep, but let me take you into a moment that mirrors your journey more than you might realize. Picture a young woman who worked tirelessly day after day, pouring her heart into everything, giving more than she received, always trying to be strong for others while silently struggling herself. And one day she hit a wall, emotionally drained, spiritually tired, mentally exhausted, and she thought, what's the point of trying this hard if nothing ever changes? And she sat alone in her room, crying quietly, feeling unseen, feeling worn out. And right in the middle of her tears, she felt a warmth, not physical, but spiritual, a presence that wrapped around her like peace. And she didn't hear a loud voice, she didn't see a vision, she simply felt God whisper to her heart, I see you. And that whisper broke her in the most healing way, because that was the moment she realized she wasn't fighting alone. She wasn't holding everything together by herself. God was carrying the weight she couldn't. And that same whisper is for you right now. I see you. And God doesn't just see your strength. He sees your struggle. He sees your effort. He sees your heart. He sees how much you've tried. And He's saying, because you stayed faithful through the battle, I'm about to be faithful in your blessing. And that blessing might not look like what you expect, but it will feel like peace. It will feel like relief. It will feel like elevation. And it will feel like God saying, I told you I had you. Because He does. He always has. And in the next 24 hours, He's going to prove it in a way that hits your soul like a wave. And listen, I'm not talking about random luck or coincidence. I'm talking about divine confirmation, something that shows up at the perfect moment, something that speaks directly to your situation, something that makes you pause and say, okay, God, I hear you. Because once God starts revealing things, He doesn't stop halfway. He finishes what He starts. He completes what He begins. And He's not done speaking through this message, not even close, because there's still something you need to hear, something that's going to shift the way you walk, the way you pray, the way you think, the way you move forward. And the energy of this moment is building because God is aligning your spirit with what's coming, and your soul can feel it.
Your soul can feel it rising like a quiet tide, something steady, something powerful, something that doesn't need to shout to be real. And the reason it feels so strong is because God is awakening a part of you that's been waiting for this very moment, a part that's been buried under stress, under doubt, under fear, under people's opinions,
under life's chaos, and now that part is stretching again, breathing again, remembering who you are and who you're called to be. And the craziest thing is, this awakening isn't coming from outside of you, it's coming from within. Because God placed something in you that life couldn't kill, something the enemy couldn't destroy, something circumstances couldn't erase. And that something is your purpose, your anointing, your spiritual DNA, the very thing that makes you a chosen one. And as this message pours into your spirit, that purpose is rising like fire, pushing through the ashes of everything you survived, lifting you higher than the version of you that used to settle, that used to doubt, that used to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, but not anymore. Because God is saying, this is your moment to expand, to step into rooms you once felt unqualified for, to claim blessings you once felt too small for, to walk boldly into opportunities that used to intimidate you. And that confidence isn't arrogance, it's alignment. It's what happens when your spirit finally catches up with the truth God has been speaking over you since the beginning. And speaking of beginnings, let me take you into a real moment. A moment so simple but so powerful that it mirrors where you are right now. Picture a man standing at a bus stop late at night, cold, tired, thinking about giving up on a dream he'd been chasing for years. And everything in him said, it's pointless, just quit. And right as he decided to stop trying, a random stranger walked up, someone he had never seen before, someone he would never see again. And that stranger said, you look like someone who's fighting through something big, but don't give up because you're closer than you think. And then the stranger walked away as quickly as he came. And the man stood there stunned, shocked, confused, because how could a random person speak so directly to what he was going through? How could a stranger know the exact encouragement he needed in that exact moment? And that's when he realized that wasn't random, that was God. That was divine timing. That was spiritual intervention disguised as a stranger. And God does that. He shows up in the smallest ways that hit the deepest parts of your spirit. And that's what's happening with this message right now. It's not just words on a screen, it's divine timing meeting you at a crucial moment, at a moment where you needed confirmation, where you needed strength, where you needed someone to say, you're closer than you think. And God is saying it loud, saying it clear, saying it directly to your spirit. Don't give up because you're right on the edge of something I've been preparing for you. And the incredible thing is, the pressure you've been feeling, the heaviness, the spiritual weight, all of it is because you're so close to breakthrough that the enemy is trying everything to distract you, discourage you, confuse you. But not this time, because now you're aware. Now your spirit is awake. Now you know what's happening. And awareness is power. Awareness is armor. Awareness is clarity. And clarity breaks confusion every single time. Which is why the next 24 hours are going to feel different. Not because your whole life flips instantly, but because your perspective shifts, your spirit strengthens, your mind clears. And when your mind clears, your path clears, because half the battle was the weight on your thoughts, the overthinking, the spiraling, the questioning. And God is breaking that off you right now, piece by piece, layer by layer, and making room for peace, real peace, the kind that settles your soul, the kind that quiets the noise, the kind that wraps around you like calm air after a storm. And that peace is going to be one of the first signs of what God is doing in the next 24 hours. Because before He changes your situation, He changes your spirit. Before He shifts your life, He shifts your mindset. Before He opens the door, He prepares the one who's walking through it. And He's been preparing you even when you didn't feel it, even when you didn't see it, even when you wondered if anything was happening at all. But now the preparation is turning into activation. The waiting is turning into movement. The silence is turning into revelation. And God is saying, get ready. ready, because I'm not done speaking, I'm not done shifting, I'm not done revealing. And this message is still unfolding, still building, still rising, because your spirit is ready for more.
For generations, people carried an image of God as distant, stern, and unreachable, a ruler who watched humanity from far away. But when Jesus walked the earth, he shattered that image with a story so simple yet so revolutionary that it changed the world's understanding of God forever. He spoke of a father who doesn't wait in cold silence, but who runs toward his children with overwhelming compassion. He described a God moved by love, who doesn't hesitate to break cultural norms or risk dignity to embrace the broken. In a world where patriarchs never ran, Jesus painted a picture of a father sprinting across dusty ground to reclaim a lost child, showing that love moves faster than status, tradition, or pride. This story wasn't just a teaching, it was a revelation of the heart of God, a heart that bends toward the hurting, a heart that embraces before it judges, a heart that welcomes before it questions. True strength, as Jesus revealed, isn't found in domination or control, but in tenderness, in the quiet courage of bending low to lift someone who has fallen. It's the strength of a nurse squeezing a trembling hand, a mentor urging a struggling soul forward, a stranger offering kindness to someone unseen. Heaven's greatest power is not wrath, but welcome, not punishment, but presence, not fear, but embrace. If anyone ever wondered what God is really like, Jesus answered it with the image of a father running full speed toward a child who expected rejection but found restoration instead. And the story didn't stop with the prodigal. The father had another son, standing outside, arms crossed, heart hardened by resentment. Yet the father loved him too, not less, not second, but differently. He didn't run this time. He walked, slowly, gently, meeting the elder son where he was, showing that divine love knows how to rush when urgency calls and how to wait when patience is needed. Both sons were lost in different ways, one through rebellion and the other through pride, but the father's heart held room for both. It was a love wide enough to restore one and invite the other, a love that refuses to lose any of its children. This is what Jesus revealed, a God who runs toward those who collapse in their shame, and a God who steps outside to meet those trapped in their self-righteousness, a God who is never indifferent, never passive, never withholding affection, a God whose tenderness is not weakness but the most powerful force in the universe. And as that father figure walks toward the rising morning light, the truth becomes clear. This is the revolution of tenderness, the divine movement that embraces the prodigal and gently calls the elder brother home, reminding the world that no matter how far someone wanders or how tightly they close their heart, they are endlessly, relentlessly loved.
Even after the father embraced the prodigal and stepped outside to comfort the elder son, the deeper truth of the story was only beginning to unfold, because the real transformation wasn't just about the son's returning home. It was about what happens inside the human heart when love confronts brokenness. The younger son expected consequences, expected distance, expected a lecture or a punishment, but instead he received a robe, a ring, and a celebration he could never earn, and something inside him healed instantly. Shame loses its power the moment unconditional love steps into the room. Meanwhile, the elder son battled an invisible wound, the wound of feeling unseen despite his faithfulness, the wound of believing he had to earn affection he already had. His frustration wasn't rebellion, it was loneliness. And just as the father didn't shame the younger son for running away, he didn't shame the elder son for his anger. He simply affirmed him, reminding him that everything in the house was already his. That moment revealed that divine love doesn't play favorites. It specializes in reaching each person exactly where their heart is hurting. Some people collapse in guilt, others burn quietly in resentment. Some wander into distant lands, others get lost in their own discipline and duty. But every kind of lostness has a path home, because the Father's love adapts, shifts, and speaks the language each wounded heart needs to hear. And this is the miracle. The same love that ran to the prodigal walked patiently to the elder son. The same love that embraced messy repentance also embraced silent disappointment. The same love that restored one child empowered the other to step into celebration without fear. And while the parable ends without telling us whether the elder brother ever walked into the feast, it leaves the door open for every human listener, suggesting that the choice remains ours. The Father stands outside the house of bitterness waiting for us, not with pressure or guilt, but with invitation. He doesn't force his children children into joy, he invites them into it. And the story, in its simplicity, reveals something breathtaking. God doesn't just forgive sin, he heals identity. He doesn't just restore brokenness, he dissolves the lies that created it. He doesn't just welcome us home, he rewrites the meaning of home itself. Because the home Jesus describes isn't a building or a farm or a banquet. It's the Father's heart, a place where grace outruns judgment, where mercy overrules failure, where tenderness transforms even the coldest soul. And everyone, whether they feel like the prodigal or the elder brother, is being drawn into that same revolution of tenderness, one step, one breath, one awakening at a time, until the walls around the human heart begin to fall and the truth becomes unmistakable. We were never meant to earn love. We were meant to experience it.
And as this truth settles deeper, the story begins to echo in the lives of countless people across generations. Because the parable isn't just an ancient teaching, it's a mirror held up to every soul. You see it in the man who spent years running from his family because he believed he was too damaged to be forgiven, only to find that the moment he finally made the first trembling call home, the people he feared facing had been waiting with open arms. You see it in the young woman who always followed the rules, always did everything right, yet felt perpetually overlooked, living with the quiet ache of believing her worth depended on performance, until one day she realized that love was never something she had to compete for. You see it in the teenager who spiraled into rebellion not because he wanted destruction, but because he was desperate to feel something real. And it wasn't until someone looked him in the eyes and told him he mattered that his life began to change. These modern prodigals and modern elder siblings walk the same roads, fight the same inner battles, and encounter the same love that Jesus described. It shows up in unexpected moments. The mentor who refuses to give up on a student, the parent who stays even when the child pushes away, the friend who listens without judgment, the stranger who shows kindness without needing a reason. Little glimpses of the Father's heart breaking into the ordinary world. And every time someone is treated with compassion instead of condemnation, forgiveness instead of fury, gentleness instead of rejection, the revolution continues. Because tenderness is contagious. It creates new possibilities inside people who thought change was impossible. The prodigal discovers that their mistake doesn't define them. The elder brother discovers that their value isn't tied to their performance. The lost begin to realize they were never truly abandoned. The hardened heart begins to thaw. The unseen person begins to feel visible. The ashamed begin to breathe again. And the invitation Jesus described, the invitation to enter the celebration of grace, becomes real in everyday life. But this revolution doesn't stop at healing individuals. It transforms families. Because when one person chooses forgiveness, the entire home begins to shift. It transforms communities. Because when people choose understanding over revenge, new stories begin to unfold. It transforms generations. Because tenderness breaks cycles that harshness only repeats. Imagine a world where running toward others becomes more common than running away. Imagine a world where people stop measuring their worth by perfection and start measuring it by the love that never fails. Imagine a world where compassion becomes normal, not surprising. This was Jesus's vision. Not a sentimental idea, but a radical, world-changing movement rooted in the simple belief that love, when revealed in its purest form, can heal what fear has broken. And in those moments when someone chooses grace, chooses reconciliation, chooses to step into the feast instead of standing outside in resentment, the story becomes more than a parable. It becomes reality. It becomes a living revolution, tender, unstoppable, divine.
And as this living revolution keeps unfolding, something even deeper begins to emerge. The realization that every human heart, no matter how strong or confident it appears on the outside, carries a silent longing to be fully seen, fully known, and fully loved. This longing is what drove the prodigal into the far country, searching for something he didn't have words for. This longing is what kept the elder brother standing outside, hoping someone would notice the weight he'd been carrying alone. And this longing still pulses inside people today, shaping their choices, their fears, their defenses, their dreams. It shows up in quiet moments, like the young man who sits in his car after work, staring at
at the steering wheel because he doesn't know how to explain the emptiness inside him. It shows up in the mother who gives everything she has to her family, yet cries silently at night because no one realizes how exhausted she truly is. It shows up in the leader who inspires everyone around him but feels like an imposter, terrified that one mistake will expose his flaws. It shows up in the elderly person sitting by a window, replaying memories of a life that moved too fast, wondering if they made any real impact. All of these stories, all of these hearts, all of these unspoken aches are woven into the same thread Jesus touched when he spoke of a Father who runs, who embraces, who listens, who restores. And this is what makes the parable so powerful. It doesn't just give answers, it gives identity. It whispers to the lonely soul that they are not forgotten. It tells the weary heart that they don't have to hold everything together. It tells the guilty that redemption is not a distant dream, but a step away. It tells the proud that humility is not humiliation, but healing. It tells the fearful that they are safe. And in the midst of this, something extraordinary happens. The human heart begins to trust again. Trust that life can change. Trust that people can be different. Trust that hope isn't foolish. Trust that love is more than a concept. It's a force that reshapes reality. You start to see it in small but undeniable ways. A father apologizes to his son for the first time in years, and the boy's walls begin to crumble. A daughter forgives her mother, and suddenly generations of bitterness lose their grip. A couple on the verge of giving up chooses to stay and rebuild, and the atmosphere of their home begins to warm again. And each act of tenderness becomes a doorway through which healing enters. Because love, in its purest form, does not demand perfection, it awakens connection. And connection is what resurrects purpose in people who thought their story was over. This is why Jesus left the ending of the parable open, because the story wasn't meant to end with two brothers and a feast. The story was meant to continue in the lives of every person who hears it and realizes that they too are being called home. Every person who recognizes the Father's steps moving toward them. Every person who feels the invitation to join the celebration of restored identity. The story stretches across centuries and continents, touching countless lives because it taps into the most universal truth of all. We were created for love, and we are transformed by love. And as the world becomes more fractured, more impatient, more hardened, this revolution of tenderness becomes not just a spiritual message, but a necessity, a reminder that the human soul, no matter how wounded, can rise again when touched by compassion. And with each life that awakens to this truth, the revolution grows, spreading quietly, powerfully, and irresistibly through hearts ready to receive something deeper than judgment, hearts ready to be renewed by grace.
And as grace continues to move through these lives, something even more remarkable begins to unfold. People start to see themselves differently, not as failures trying to earn worth, not as performers trying to keep up appearances, but as sons and daughters who belong, who matter, who carry an unshakable place in the Father's heart. The prodigal no longer wakes up each morning wondering if he'll be rejected again. Instead, he begins to rise with a new awareness that he is accepted, restored, and trusted with a future he once thought he destroyed. The elder brother, as he slowly softens, begins to understand that his worth was never tied to how perfectly he behaved or how hard he worked. And the resentment that once weighed on him starts to loosen its grip. And when people begin to shift how they see themselves, they naturally begin to shift how they see others. The judgment that once came so easily begins to fade. The impatience that once ruled their reactions begins to quiet. The urge to compare, to compete, to prove something slowly dissolves, replaced by a desire to encourage, to understand, to embrace. Because when someone truly experiences the unconditional love of the Father, they cannot help but become carriers of that same same tenderness. You see it when a person who was once defensive becomes gentle, not because they lost their strength, but because they found a deeper kind of strength, the strength that comes from being secure in their identity. You see it when someone who once held grudges begins to forgive easily, not out of weakness, but out of an overflow of the mercy they themselves received. You see it when people who once felt insignificant start lifting others up because their hearts have discovered a new confidence that isn't built on applause, but on belonging. And this change doesn't stay hidden. It ripples outward. A young man healed from shame becomes a mentor to others who feel lost. A woman who has learned to accept love begins speaking hope into those who feel invisible. A family once divided by silence begins rebuilding a bond stronger than anything they had before. Over time, these small and personal stories weave themselves into something larger, a community shaped not by fear or pride, but by grace. People begin to value connection over competition. They begin to make room for weakness instead of punishing it. They begin to practice patience where frustration once controlled them. And slowly, neighborhoods start to look different. Workplaces begin to soften. Schools begin to change. Homes become sanctuaries instead of battlegrounds. The parable of the father and his two sons becomes more than an ancient teaching. It becomes a blueprint for healing the modern world. Because every act of compassion becomes a stitch repairing the torn fabric of humanity. Every moment of forgiveness becomes a spark that ignites new beginnings. Every time someone chooses tenderness over anger, heaven touches earth in a quiet but powerful way. And as word spreads about stories of transformation, the addict who found hope, the marriage that found restoration, the parent who rediscovered their child, the friend who came back after years of silence, people realize something profound. The revolution of tenderness never depended on grand gestures or perfect people. It grows through ordinary hearts, willing to love boldly and humbly, willing to run toward the wounded instead of away from them, willing to be reflections of the Father's heart in a world desperate for kindness. And in the midst of all this change, a quiet but mighty truth emerges. The greatest miracles are not always the dramatic ones. Often the greatest miracles are simply hearts that learn how to love again. Hearts that once closed themselves off now open, slowly but surely, to the possibility of grace. Hearts that once feared vulnerability now embrace it as a pathway to healing. Hearts that once felt too damaged now realize they hold infinite value. This is how the revolution continues, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with restored hearts stepping into the world as carriers of light, compassion, and truth, proving day after day that when love runs toward humanity, nothing stays the same.
And as more hearts awaken to this light, the world begins to sense a shift, subtle at first, like the early stirrings of dawn before sunlight spills across the horizon, but undeniably present. People who once walked through life numb begin to feel again. People who once spoke harshly out of habit start catching themselves, choosing softer words, choosing to listen rather than react. People who once hid behind walls of sarcasm or indifference begin letting others in, even if only slightly at first. And that small opening becomes a doorway for something larger. Love has a way of slipping through the smallest cracks and transforming everything it touches. You see it in the way a couple who used to argue about everything now pauses long enough to understand each other. You see it in the teenager who once believed no one cared, now standing up for someone else who feels alone. You see it in the quiet man who once kept his head down at work, now offering a warm smile to someone who's clearly struggling. These small shifts may look ordinary, but they are the fingerprints of a heart that has been renewed, and the world begins to feel safer, softer, more human because of it. Tenderness does not make people weak. It makes them brave enough to show up authentically. It takes strength to admit pain, to ask for help, to apologize, to forgive, to stay present, to love without guarantee. These are the acts of courage that reshape destinies. And the more they happen, the more people start to believe that life doesn't have to be an endless cycle of hurt and defensive protection. They begin to recognize that relationships can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, that hope can rise from ashes, that hearts can start over even after years of disappointment. The revolution of tenderness doesn't doesn't deny reality, it transforms it. It looks at brokenness and says, you are not the end of the story. It looks at failure and says, you are not disqualified. It looks at fear and says, you are not in control anymore. And gradually, people begin living from a place of freedom instead of fear. They stop obsessing over what others think of them because they've discovered that true identity is rooted in love, not approval. They stop clinging to their mistakes because forgiveness has loosened their chains. They stop carrying blame that was never theirs to hold. And as these burdens fall away, something beautiful rises in their place, a sense of purpose that was always there but buried beneath layers of insecurity and pain. Purpose begins to speak again, whispering reminders of the dreams they once had, the gifts they were born with, the contributions they are meant to make. People begin to see that their lives matter, not because they are perfect, but because they are deeply loved. And when someone knows they are loved, really loved, they become capable of extraordinary things. They begin to take risks they once avoided. They begin to build relationships they once believed were impossible. They begin to chase goals they once abandoned. They begin to walk into spaces with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing they are held, valued, chosen, and all around them, others take notice. A single restored heart becomes a beacon that draws others into restoration. One person's healing becomes the seed of healing in a whole circle of influence. A community begins to shape itself around compassion rather than competition. A workplace begins to shift toward understanding rather than pressure. A family begins breaking patterns of anger and teaching patterns of grace. The ripple becomes a wave, and the wave becomes a movement that touches more lives than any single person could ever imagine. The beauty of this transformation is that it doesn't require grand speeches or dramatic events. It simply requires people willing to live from a place of love instead of fear. And in doing so, they become living parables, modern reflections of the Father who ran to his child, modern echoes of the love Jesus revealed, modern proof that tenderness is still the most powerful force in the world. And as this truth continues to spread quietly through hearts, homes, and communities, it becomes clear that the revolution of tenderness is not slowing down. It is only gaining strength.
And as this movement gains strength, something even more profound begins to take shape. People start realizing that tenderness is not just an emotion. It's a choice, a posture, a way of seeing the world. It's the decision to look at someone's behavior and ask what pain might be hiding beneath it. It's the decision to look at your own mistakes and choose growth instead of shame. It's the decision to love even when loving feels risky, to forgive even when forgiveness feels unfair, to hope even when hope feels fragile. This kind of tenderness reshapes how people interact with conflict. Instead of exploding in anger or withdrawing into silence, they learn to stand in discomfort with honesty and grace. Arguments no longer become wars, they become opportunities to understand each other. Disagreements no longer become divisions, they become bridges for deeper connection. Even when voices rise or tension fills the room, tenderness whispers, slow down, listen, remember who you are, remember who they are, and slowly the atmosphere shifts. People who once felt attacked begin to feel heard. People who once felt ignored begin to feel valued. People who once felt hopeless begin to sense possibility again. And in this new environment, trust starts to regrow. Walls that took years to build begin to crack. The air becomes lighter, the tone becomes softer, and the relationship begins to heal in places that once seemed beyond repair. It's in these ordinary moments, a calm conversation after years of conflict, a sincere apology after seasons of pride, a heartfelt word where silence once stood, that the revolution of tenderness becomes undeniably real. And as this reality spreads, it shapes how people see themselves. They no longer define themselves by their failures or their flaws. They begin to see that the Father's love is not a distant ideal, but a living truth shaping their daily lives. They start believing that they were created for connection, for joy, for belonging, for purpose. And this identity gives them courage to confront the parts of themselves they once avoided, the memories that hurt, the patterns that trapped them, the fears that controlled them. But now they approach these things not with dread, but with a sense of hope, knowing that anything brought into the light can be healed. They begin tending to their inner world with gentleness, recognizing that healing is not a race, but a journey. Some days are breakthroughs and some days are stumbles, but both are part of restoration. They stop expecting perfection from themselves. They stop beating themselves up for moments of weakness. They start celebrating small victories, a calmer response, a kinder word, a braver step forward, and each victory becomes fuel for the next one. Lives begin to feel lighter, not because circumstances always change, but because people learn to carry their hearts differently. They learn that burdens shared are burdens halved. They learn that vulnerability is not a flaw, but a pathway to genuine connection. They learn that asking for help is a sign of wisdom, not weakness. And those who once felt isolated begin to discover community in ways they never expected. They meet others who are walking the same journey, carrying the same wounds, seeking the same healing. Conversations become deeper. Friendships become more meaningful. People begin to feel safe enough to be honest, open enough to be supported, brave enough to be real. And it's in this authentic connection that the revolution grows strongest, because tenderness, when practiced together, becomes a force that can transform entire cultures. You see it in classrooms, where teachers choose encouragement over shame. You see it in workplaces, where leaders choose empathy over intimidation. You see it in neighborhoods, where strangers become allies instead of threats. You see it in families, where forgiveness flows freely and love becomes the foundation instead of the reward. And with every person who embraces this way of life, the world becomes a little more whole, a little more hopeful, a little more human. Tenderness becomes like a lantern passed from one person to another, illuminating dark corners, warming cold spaces, guiding lost hearts home. And the more it spreads, the clearer it becomes that this movement was never about striving for perfection, but about awakening to love, a love that heals, restores, and redefines everything it touches. And as hearts continue to awaken, the revolution marches quietly but powerfully forward, proving that even in a world filled with noise and chaos, the softest voice, the voice of love, still holds the greatest power.